In this video I'm going to show you how I built these cheap and easy medieval inspired fantasy buildings that can be easily mass produced, meaning you can turn your boring battleground into a sprawling medieval metropolis in no time at all. Welcome to Cheap and Easy Wargaming, where we keep the hobby fun, fast and affordable. So a few years ago I made this Halloween display at the front of the house, and to make the gravestones I bought this large sheet of polyurethane insulation board. So while it did cost £9, and I never would have even considered spending that much if it was just going to be for Wargames terrain, I found this stuff incredibly useful for a whole range of projects. The sheer amount that you get and the table coverage that allows makes it definitely worth getting. It is available in different thicknesses. This is 5 centimeters, which is maybe just a little bit too short for the scale that I use, but it does work great with your standard 28 to 32 millimeter Wargaming miniatures. But even with my green plastic army man scale, once these things are put together, that scale isn't obvious at all. So while I'm not actually measuring anything here, I'm just kind of eyeballing a rough size. I am using a ruler to get some nice straight edges. However, with the original buildings that I made that you can see in the pips here, I didn't use a ruler at all, and there are all kinds of just wavy bent lines that I think really actually add to the medieval fantasy type aesthetic. I still haven't got around to playing my Discworld inspired Sword Weirdos game, but I think these buildings would suit the Ankh-Morpork aesthetic perfectly. As always, when cutting polystyrene or anything similar, make sure you're using a very sharp blade and you're making lots of small cuts. No measuring or getting anything too square on the edges here. Again, I don't want it to be perfect right angles. I do want some character to these buildings. In true medieval style, we want the upper floors to be slightly larger than the ground floor. So again, just not measuring anything, just getting a rough idea of where I want that to be. You'll get an idea here of how you can really start to mass produce these buildings if that's what you want to do. Eyeballing them as you go, just to make sure you're happy with how it's looking. It did take me until this point to realise that I'd never actually gotten around to taking the silver foil off one side of this polyurethane. It did go some way to explain why the blade felt like it was dragging so much, but even then it still wasn't particularly difficult to cut. I did keep the foil because I suspect that's going to come in useful for a future project. These are just 2-story buildings, but clearly you can see the potential for making them as tall as you want. This top layer I'm going to use for the roof, and I'm just going to eyeball where about the center of that roof is going to be. Then I'll use that center line to be able to draw the guides for cutting the roof shape. As I keep saying, just make sure it's small cuts. Just take your time, try and get these right. I did rush them on other buildings I've done before, and it can get problematic and quite messy, even if you are still going for that not quite straight, rough medieval look. And if you're as lucky as I am, the 2 pieces that you would have cut off there can also form a roof of reduce, reuse, recycle. So the piece I'm using for the base of this building here already has a random piece sticking out of it, so I'm just going to cut that down to a more visually pleasing size and carve that into an outhouse. So the more random shapes they have sticking onto them and out of them, and the more it looks like they've just been built over time, added to and tweaked here and there, just adds to that character and the overall aesthetic that we're going for. It may not surprise you to know that I didn't really have any kind of plan as I was going into this as to what the buildings are going to look like. I just saw what random shapes I had left as I was building them and decided to start sticking them together in different ways. This piece looked to me like an old rustic chimney, so that's what it is. Also, it covers up that gap in the roof there as well, so dual purpose. I feel the roof on the outhouse here is sticking out way too much. It doesn't look right, and also this polyurethane is very breakable, so you don't want anything sticking out too much. It's obviously going to get caught and snapped off. Making chimneys is also very easy using just offcuts you've got already. You don't need to worry about them being perfectly perpendicular. There have been people ask me in previous videos where I use blades without handles, and it's cutting thicker pieces of polystyrene like this is just one of the reasons. I feel the handles get in the way and stop me from being able to cut like right along the edges. It can make the blade quite difficult to hold, especially if it's dragging through thick polystyrene, so that cable tie that you just saw on the blade there is how I've kind of managed that. It just gives me something to hold on to and to loop my finger through to pull. There's probably much easier ways, but that's just my way. One thing I did want to include on these buildings is some random stairs. They don't have to make any logical kind of sense, but I think they do look really cool, and they can add more kind of complexity or strategy to the game. Ultimately, to me, visually interesting is way more important than making any kind of logical sense. And as luck would have it, this material is just really, really good for carving out shapes, steps being just one of them. And even more luckily, as I'd carve these out, I realised they were way too wide. So that allowed me to cut them in half. And then I had a second set of steps for a different building. If you are enjoying any of these moments of inspiration that are just coming to me as I'm making this stuff up, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me and inspires me to keep this channel going. I'm still just looking around at the shapes I've got left, wondering what I can do to add some more character to these buildings. And with this one, I decided to add this kind of tower to the side. This reminds me of a kind of haunted house, the Addams Family or Bates Motel kind of vibe going on there. The only real complication here is just measuring it out to make sure that upper floor slots in. As you can see, this stuff cuts so easily, it's actually quite therapeutic. The roof piece is just another block that fits straight on top there, and without any measuring, I'm just going to roughly eyeball the lines to be able to cut the slopes for the roof. Using this spare set of steps, I'm just going to mark out a doorway to recess because of the overhang, taking up most of the step. And as you saw, just cut off the end of the steps to make sure it all lines up nicely. I'm going to use a few different techniques for adding the different details to these buildings, and depending on how quickly or what kind of look you want for the buildings, you can either use these or not. I started by trying to just carve some basic brickwork with a pen to leave an indentation. I then started using a Sharpie to try and fill in the recesses, thinking this might save me some time later on. As you can see, the Sharpie is not really working. That's just leaving big clumpy black spots everywhere. The pen also wasn't working quite as well as I was hoping it was going to. I thought it might leave the black lining there again, just to already having it darkened up, ready for the painting. So another moment of inspiration, I ended up using just the corner of this ruler, which was sharp but not too sharp, and that actually gave quite a nice indentation and allowed me to carve the bricks in a really nice way. Way better than a knife or the pen would have. So I do try out a few different techniques here as to different ways of getting windows, doors, wooden beams and brick effects. The whole point of these buildings and this video is to get mass-produced, quick and easy terrain. So I'll show you how a few of those work out as we go. This way I'm just carving the windows, the frames, the bricks using this ruler, and that does give a smoother edging when just painting straight onto it. There's also lots of other older techniques you can use, using cardboard and wooden sticks and things. Again, there are people that have done that before and done it better. I'm just trying to come up with my own thing to see how that works. Here, using a pen to create the rough wooden look of a door. And all of those things coming together give us this result, which, depending on the look you're going for, it's not too bad. It doesn't take very long to do at all. So for this one, we're not going to do bricks. I'm going to do some wooden beams supporting the corners. So you can see just carving those in with the ruler here and using the finger behind along the edge of the building to be able to keep that groove fairly straight. And then just switching the building around, you can work your way around in a methodical manner in order to get all of the corners there. Methodical manner isn't something that you'll hear thrown around on this channel a lot, so make the most of it when you do. I finish the corner beams and then start doing the top and bottom. I probably should have looked at some reference material first. I guess the top and bottom beams probably would have been on there first before the side beams, who knows, but work that as you will. Once you've got your horizontal and vertical beams all in place, then you can randomly just start adding some diagonal corner beams, support struts as you see fit. Which brings us up to the roof. Now, again, there was a few different techniques and things I had in my head I wanted to try. This one involved just pressing a long, hard, straight edge, here a ruler, into the material in order to create a slight steps that as the work down the roof would hopefully look like tiles. In my head beforehand, this technique was going to work really well and look really good. I don't think it did. I didn't do it justice, but I think that's probably me. I'm sure someone out there would be able to do this a lot better than I have here. For all I know, this technique could actually already be a thing. I don't know. I don't watch too many tutorials. I try to keep everything I do here original. That's what makes this channel what it is. However, if you have used this technique, I would really appreciate it if you'd feedback just to how you found it or how it works. Like I said, I'm going to try it again at another time because I do think it would work. Maybe I just wasn't using the right tools or I was trying to rush. My plan was once I had these steps pressed into the roof, then use this ruler edge again just to carve the tiles. They're quite big. Clearly, they're not in scale here. Again, I'm just trying to get a passable roof done quickly. I'm not too worried about scale. It's just an overall aesthetic that I'm going for so I can play games. Cutting those chunks out of the corners there adds another little detail, makes things look a little bit more authentic. That I quite like. And from there, just keep working your way up, similar to what we did with the bricks. And that's what that one looked like. You can see those slight steps when you look at the right angle. I still just wasn't very happy with it though. For this one, I go back to the basic brick carving technique I've just used on the walls. Holding the ruler at a slight angle there to just, again, give that slight impression of small steps. Then using that ruler's edge again, just scoring that line to differentiate the edge of the tiles from the edge of the building. This just makes the painting process a little bit straighter and clearer. Anything that makes painting easier for me is good. Same rough brick technique used to carve the bricks for the chimney here. Experimenting with different tools, it turns out that any old random piece of plastic can be used to carve this polyurethane. Here I am using a security seal corner, and I'm carving some random rough bricks to form the stairs or steps on the outside of one of the houses. I say bricks, it's actually more of a kind of rustic stonework, and this technique would work really well also with rocky walls, rocky hills, that kind of thing. Very simple to do, just carve out the rough shape that you want and then using the tool at a slight angle just to press in around the edges gives it more of that 3D rounded effect. Arguably this tool might be a bit too square at the end, so maybe I could have carved that into a rounder shape or just used some Play-Doh tools. I have used those in the past from my kids' collections and they give some quite good effects as well. You get a good range of shapes with them. As you can see, once that's done, you get this kind of effect. Tossing aside any methodical manners I may have alluded to earlier, we'll come back to more techniques I'm trying out for the roof. So similar kind of starting situation here, carving where we want the tiles to be. My plan here was using a sharp blade just to cut out each row of tiles at a slight angle, again to give that stepped effect. And while you can see what I'm going for in the video here, obviously the way I've done it is far too deep. I've made the cuts too deep, the angle's too sharp, it's just a big mess. I do, however, stand by the theory that this really should work if someone just has the time and the patience to be able to give it a try. If it does work for you, let me know. I'd really appreciate any feedback. For these steps, I'm going to go for a cleaner, straighter brickwork, similar to the houses, but a little bit smaller and neater. This is just to demonstrate that this is an option that you can use. Using the thick black Sharpie, it gives me a good guide as to cutting these V-shaped angles, making sure that they are wide enough. So if I know I've cut away the whole of the thick black line, then that's a good guide for me. This way also helps to make sure that the lines are straight, more neat, uniform. Again, it depends on the kind of aesthetic that you are going for. Remembering to cut around the sides and the vertical lines also. Once everything is arranged, it's simply a case of gluing it together. I'm just going to use PVA glue and these cocktail sticks, which is pretty standard for anybody that's done this before. And to speed the process up, I'm just going to add a blob of hot glue, not enough to melt it, but just enough to hold it in place whilst the PVA is setting. Purely for aesthetic purposes, cutting out some small triangles here that will act as wedges. And just because this random bit of video was in the middle of the video I've made here, so these are some walls and various little decorations I've made similar in the past. Super quick and easy to make using the techniques I've already used. And it really adds so much to the game, both visually and technically while you're playing, just to have a handful of these walls and things just lying around. Anyone that's watched any number of my videos before knows my absolute disdain for painting. So I am going to use a few different techniques here in no particular order, as you'll see as we go along, literally making it up as I go. What I wanted to do here was just create a base coat for everything. I wanted it watery, so it soaked into all of the little gaps and cracks. It didn't work quite as well as I'd hoped. It was a little bit too thick to go on. So I then started adding more water. I also added PVA glue to the mix as well in order for it to create a seal as well as a base coat. As I said earlier, this material and polystyrene, if you're using that instead, are very breakable. So the PVA glue will help to keep it just a little bit stronger. There's all kinds of great painting tutorials out there for buildings just like this. So feel free to turn off the video now and go and watch one of those. I didn't watch any tutorials before I started this. I just looked at some color schemes that I Googled and just tried to go for those. So just trying to lighten up this yellow color now to make it look a little bit more natural, old worldy. And mixing up a basic, just base gray for the stonework. And just touching up some of these things that I'd made quite a while ago as well. Using a lighter grey then just to add a dry brush to really bring out the texture of the brick walls. So cards on the table, I really don't get what the whole blue roof thing on medieval fantasy buildings is all about. I don't think it looks right, but who am I to judge? That's what people like, so here we are. As you can see, all these paints are just cheap acrylic paints I get from the arts and crafts aisle of my local shop. I'm watering down some brown just to paint these wooden beams and the details that I'd carved into the walls earlier, using them as nice straight edges. But another technique that's even simpler is just to paint it straight on to the polystyrene, as you can see here. I'm not a painter, and even though this seemed to start off quite well with quite defined edges there, this all quickly broke down for me and ended up just getting quite messy and not really quite sure where the lines are or started or finished. But it is a very good and quick way to get windows, doors, panels, details, anything like that on there if you're going for something that's just a bit more quick and easy. Even at the best of times, I don't bother building up lighter tones to add depth to any of my models, and the last dry brush I added to this didn't really bring it out as much as I would have liked. So this is just a straight up white now, and I'm just going to be dry brushing that over all of the grey and yellow. I thought a dry brush of the original blue over the roofs would just bring out the details there, but I didn't like the look of that. So then I made a lighter, whiter, greyer dry brush and added that, and that just looked awful. It was just far too bright for the aesthetic I'm going for. Back to grey, and if I'd planned any of this out, I would have just used the one grey I'd used originally to paint in the windows. So painting a combination here of the windows that have the indented line and also just making some up where I think a window should be, whichever one suits your purposes best. You can see here some of the detail where I pulled off the silver foil and it's left these kind of cracks. It looks like exposed kind of rockery and brickwork underneath. That has a really good effect. That worked out to my advantage. A slight dry brush over that really does bring out the details brilliantly. Obviously on the upper left corner of the wall there, you can see where I have carved in some bricks to represent the plaster breaking off. That was obviously carved in and not just what happened when I pulled off the silver. That would be awesome if that were the case. Painting on just more random windows wherever the voice in my head tells me they should go. Using a different brown just to add a bit of variety, I then start painting around the windows that I've just painted, using them as a guide for where the window frame should be. Might seem like a no-brainer, but it's a lot easier doing it that way than painting the window frames first and then the window inside it. Follow me for more stupid tips just like that. So to be honest, at this point of the day, I was just rushing, so I really need to try and get these videos finished quick. Time is a scarcity, so as you can see, the doors here are very half-arsed, even by my usual half-arsed standards. And especially between the tiles on the roof, you can see there's little white patches where you can still see the polystyrene through. If I was just making these for myself, I would have considered them finished a long time ago. But what I'm going to try and do here is create a wash, some watered down black with some washing up liquid, and I'm painting that on in the hope it's going to sink between all of these tiles and cracks and fill in any gaps, any white patches, make them black or at least darker so they're not so noticeable. And I'm also going to use that black wash on any of the brick and stonework again, just to try and create that illusion of depth. I didn't feel I needed to do that really, as I was quite happy with the dry brush. That was good enough for me, but as I'd got the black out anyway, I thought I may as well give it a go, just see what happens. Another option I've also come up with for the windows is some shutters to go over them. So we can either use shutters to completely cover where a window should be, which would save us the hassle of having to make the window or paint the window in the first place, or we can have the shutters open, which just, it adds a lot to the finished product. And it's very simple to do. Just cutting out a strip of card. This is from a cereal box. Sizes don't have to be measured or exact, just eyeball guesstimate them. Once you've got your piece of card, you're going to use a ballpoint pen just to emboss the grains of the wood. The black pen will automatically give that illusion of depth, and then it will make the dry brushing a lot easier. Doing it on the second piece of card here will also help the pen sink further into the card. I just watered down a dark green and then painted that on, allowing the black lines to show through, just to keep everything quick and simple. But then thought of an even easier, quicker way to mass produce things like this, and just scribbling straight onto a bigger piece of card and painting it before it's being cut out. This just means you can get a lot more done in a lot less time. It's also a lot less fiddly, as you can just dry brush them all in one big go. Cut them out to roughly the size that you want. Cut that piece in half, safe in the knowledge that this blind would cover the window. Put it in place, realize actually that's way too big and looks ridiculous. Cut them both down smaller. Realize that what really matters is it looks cool, and it doesn't matter if it actually covers the window when it's closed or not. I stick them on using hot glue just so that it doesn't slide off whilst I'm waiting for it to dry. And also, as I'm attaching it, I hold it at a slight angle away, so it's not perfectly flat against the wall. It's just a slight angle, and that again just gives a little bit of variation and character to it. Just to be clear, I'm not sure what that black curly thing is on the card there, but I can assure you it's not what you think it is. Now I've got my mojo on and I'm just mass producing these things. You can see where I haven't quite painted the whole thing. There's some cards showing through. It's dark cards, so it just looks like faded paintwork, to be fair. If anything, my poor paint job just adds to the realism. Continuing to stick these on in various ways. Some of them are covering windows, some of them are slightly open, some of them are at angles, so it looks like the hinges are broken and it's hanging down. So if this was just myself, I'd be more than happy with it as it is. However, I'm making this video, so I thought I'd show you all the respect of at least trying to make a better door in case you wanted that option. Same technique, same piece of card, just painted a different color and then cutting strips from that other piece that we mass produced to make a door frame around. If I'd taken more time and care over this project, or if I did it again, I would probably do the same thing for the windows. And as I've done here, I would glue it all together as a piece first before I then just glue it straight onto the building. Here I've done the same to the recessed door. Also you can see the diagonal support struts there. And as this project seems to just keep on escalating, I've now decided I need hinges on all of the shutters. Give the cocktail sticks a quick paint of silver, and while I've got it, I'll do these spikes sticking out the roof as well. Then cut the cocktail sticks into small sections, so you have a handful of these. I used hot glue because I had it to hand and I wanted to do this quick. You can see the first one that I've done there at the top was a bit clumpy and messy, so I was just more careful with subsequent ones that they weren't going to have such big clumps of glue. Then I tried just applying the glue straight onto the model and sticking the hinge onto it from there, and that worked a lot better. And then I thought of holding the hinge that way in the pliers, which again, brilliant. This really is the project that just keeps on giving. I tried dry brushing yet more white to bring the model together more and bring out some of these details again that seems to have been lost somewhere along the way. Mixing up a dark green, I then used this rough old brush here to stipple on some effectively moss or grass or just mold that may have accumulated in cracks. I feel this broke up the blandness of the grey, as well as allowing the model to blend more with the grass when it goes on the grass battle mat. A heavily watered down brown just to add some streaks, again from damp rain just weathering over the course of time. And that is where I'm going to call it a day. Like I say, I don't have a lot of time trying to fit this in around work and family and being a grown-up. I've learned quite a few things along the way. Hopefully you've picked up a few things as well that you might be able to tweak and use in your own wargaming. It's a cost of less than £10 for that sheet of polyurethane, plus any cardboard from some cereal boxes. Just the sheer volume of buildings that you could get from this, and the fact that you could get a decent sized medieval town done within a day. I know these things don't really stand up to close inspection, but they are super cheap, super simple. If you just want a fun, quick, easy game, you want to get your terrain made on the table and ready to go, then these are definitely the way forward. I've never played Mordheim, but things like Dungeons & Dragons, Age of Fantasy, Age of Sigmar. I'm definitely looking forward to a Sword Weirdos game based around the Ankh-Morpork, Terry Pratchett Discworld books. And no doubt I'm going to be reintroducing that skeleton army that I made in the last video as well. For anyone that's still watching at this point, thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. If you could consider giving a like, a thumbs up, subscribing, again, that's really, really appreciated. I am at a point at the minute where I'm wondering whether to keep going with this channel. There's a lot of conflicting kind of real life grown-up stuff going on as well. So, you know, let me know that this is actually helping you. As always, please be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other, and until next time, still keep being cheap and easy.